Hi, I'm Elmer Roderick Niembul, and today I'll be presenting how the neural programming language can help create human-readable deterministic AI using biomimicry. Just a quick recap before we continue. In our last lightning talk on neural for database normalization, we looked at how we can translate database tables into a neural network. If you'd like to watch a recording of that lightning talk, you may use the QR code on this slide to watch it online. In this presentation, we'll look at how we can convert a popular symbolic programming language called C# into a neural network. Having been a software developer for more than 20 years, what would sometimes keep me up at night are software errors or flaws, also known as bugs, that are uncovered in production. Some bugs are acceptable, especially if they are non-life threatening. Sometimes, however, bugs can be very deadly. In two unfortunate accidents in 2018 and 2019, in what is now known as the MCAS software failure, faulty software acted on invalid data from a faulty sensor reading, causing the software to activate and pull the nose of an aircraft down, resulting in a tug of war between the flight crew and the aircraft. The pilots were pulling up, while the aircraft was pulling its nose down. It reminded me of similar situations in the past wherein I had to fix critical, however non-life threatening, production issues as quickly as possible. If I had access to the code and I was able to change it, I simply made a few adjustments to the code, rebuilt it, and deployed the hotfix so the error could be resolved ASAP. Today, 4 years after the initial release of ChatGPT, software developers and non-technical users alike continue to grapple with the unpredictability and unexplainability of generative AI, also known as GenAI. Unlike good old-fashioned AI, also known as GOFAI, which makes use of symbols that are human-readable, GenAI makes use of huge amounts of tokenized training data, which is very difficult to inspect and audit, making it challenging to understand which specific data resulted in which specific faulty responses, such as biases, hallucinations, and misinformation. While there are efforts underway and GOFAI tools being developed and used that help make GenAI human readable, these tools only work after the fact. At its core, we still have models that are inherently unreadable, therefore difficult, if not impossible, to monitor or correct in real time. Would it be great if we were able to trace and read the specific tokens and links that resulted in a specific response, so that we ourselves can validate our own and the Gen AI's assumptions as quickly as we need to? Unfortunately, not everyone has the time to learn how to read and write computer languages. And even though Gen AI can help us auto-generate GOFAI, at the end of the day, and when it becomes critical to understand and fine-tune the inner workings of auto-generated GOFAI, neither the unexplainable Gen AI and the indecipherable GOFAI will make things easier for the non-technical user. In fact, it will be the opposite. This, I believe, is the root problem. As a programmer for over 20 years, I've had to learn dozens of computer languages, including markup languages, programming languages, database query languages, and so on. And it's not easy. Interestingly, there are now thousands of computer languages, and the list keeps on growing. It got me thinking, how do we humans do it? How do we coordinate our daily lives and adapt to ever changing realities as necessary? What if right behind our very noses hides a programming language that has evolved for millions of years and has enabled intelligent organisms to survive and adapt? This led me to question the fundamentals of why and how we build software to simulate intelligence, and compared it to how natural intelligence does it so seamlessly and efficiently. In a popular programming language called C#, we combine primitive types such as symbols and characters, including spaces, to form statements such as if and switch conditions that direct execution to other statements that may process expected outputs. On the other hand, in nature, our nervous systems make use of reflex arcs that converts sensory input into motor output. For example, when a stimulus is encountered, the signal from that stimulus will travel up the sensory neuron to the spinal column. There, it will likely pass through a short interneuron before continuing down a motor neuron to the origin of the signal. Then, a contraction of the muscles is triggered, moving the bone. Going back to the C# code we saw earlier, something that always fascinated me at different points in my career is the realization that all labels in software are arbitrary and therefore optional, and that all AI, whether it's GOFAI or GenAI, are simply graph networks, or more specifically, and in light of the concepts discussed in this presentation, approximations of biological neural networks. Consider a thought experiment wherein all software, such as file systems, social networks, enterprise systems, databases, and so on, all the English keywords and terms in the code and data of these systems are translated into another language, like for example, Filipino. Interestingly, it would all still work. We could have used other languages or symbols like emojis, hieroglyphics, Italian, Japanese, and so on, but the same truth holds. For if we remove the labels and the symbols, or rather the pointers to essentially the ideas in our heads, which I think is another key takeaway of this thought experiment, what will emerge is number one, something that resembles a biological neural network, and number two, a form of intelligence that simply works, as a direct result of its primitives, combinations or connections, and the encoded parameters therein. In 2022, scientists were able to place brain cells in a dish and enabled it to play the computer game Pong. Last March, scientists uploaded a video wherein they copied the biological brain of a fly into a digital environment and placed it inside a digitized fly body. Interestingly, the fly started behaving and moving around like an actual fly, which brings us back to the result of our thought experiment earlier. Biological neural networks, whether they're in situ, in vitro, or in silico, are by themselves not human-readable. Therefore, to facilitate communication and deeper understanding between humans and other humans, as well as humans and AI, it would make sense that the crucial next step is to label and codify them, and to formalize neural networks into a universal language. To validate our hypothesis, we integrated key concepts in computer science, neuroscience, philosophy, and linguistics, whose basic mechanisms, namely primitive elements, means of combination, and means of abstraction, are taken from computer science. Then, from neuroscience, it uses neurons and axon terminals as its primitive elements, as well as neural networks, grandmother cells, and reflex arcs as its means of combination. And finally, from philosophy and linguistics, it uses definitions, arguments, minimalist grammar, and dependency grammar as further means of combination. Using reflex arcs, we were able to replicate if conditions and switches in C# and use them to convert sensory input into motor output. For example, simulating the stimulus of the sight of Zach at the same time a reaction is anticipated, the interneuron to the left, labeled react when funny actor seen, is fully excited, as indicated by the 4 green arrows around it, thereby spiking the response neuron labeled increased volume at the top. On the other hand, the interneuron labeled react when sexy actor seen to the right is not fully excited, as indicated by the red arrow, since the input neuron, sexy, was not spiked. In our Hello Worm prototype, we simulated a tiny brain containing only 29 neurons and 67 terminals for converting sensory input into behavior. As we can see in this recording, which can be accessed using the QR code on this slide, A digitized worm is able to follow odor particles, forage for food, and turn whenever it hits walls. In addition, we can also see in this recording in real time how action potentials are processed from sensory neurons to interneurons and finally to motor neurons. As if looking through a microscope directly into the brain of a digitized worm, an authorized user now has the capability to surgically modify the neural network as necessary, similar to how developers currently edit text file based programming languages. Using neurUL, we were able to translate the C-sharp code for navigation on the left, which uses two-dimensional text files, into this multidimensional code on the right, demonstrating efficient, real-time viewable and editable, human-readable, deterministic navigation capabilities while using only labeled simulations of natural structures and processes. Which leads us to the following question. If we can use biomimicry to create a universal language to convert sensory input into behavior in a human-readable, deterministic manner, then can all AI be written in neurons and terminals? These are the types of questions we're exploring with the neurUL universal language.
Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 802.
We're currently looking for contributors who might be interested in joining us to further develop and validate the neurUL universal language. If you have any questions, would like to learn more, or are interested in exploring this project further, please feel free to reach out using the links or the QR codes below. Thank you so much for your time.